The narrative started in the gorgeous towns of Capri and Naples, where the most recent international episodes of The Bold and the Beautiful were shot. As evidence of its ongoing appeal to viewers around the world, the show, which is well known for its glitzy location shooting, has made 6 trips back to Italy in its 38-year run. The episodes promise breathtaking scenery, including sun-drenched terraces, a high-stakes fashion display, and the historic elegance of La Canzone del Mare restaurant. At the heart of the story were Ridge, Brooke, Eric Forrester, and the homecoming of Nick Marone, whose personal tragedies were heightened by the Mediterranean appeal of Italy. Fans expected the kind of emotional explosions that had characterized the show for decades, along with romance and treachery. However, they were unprepared for Ridge's world to fall apart in a way that would change how the series played out. There had always been layers of nuance in Thorsten Kaye's portrayal of Ridge. In contrast to Ron Moss, who had portrayed Ridge for 25 years with a polished, nearly untouchable charisma, Kaye gave the role a gritty, reflective edge. He was a guy divided between 2 women, Taylor, the sympathetic psychiatrist now played by Rebecca Budig, and Brooke, the fervent aspirational blonde played by Catherine Kelly Lang. The show's love triangle had been a mainstay, with decades worth of plotlines being fueled by Ridge's ambivalence. Supporters were split into 2 groups, Team Taylor and Team Brooke, each of whom was fervently devoted to their favorite duo. In particular, the Bridge faction clung to the idea that Ridge and Brooke were meant to be together, their love enduring in the face of infidelity, business conflicts, and even fatal tragedies. However, recent events in Italy raised the possibility that the bridge may have finally collapsed this time. Tension was high during the Italy episodes, which aired in late July 2025. Brooke was taken aback by Ridge's recent proposal to Taylor, which rekindled old conflicts. Ridge's engagement was supposed to mark the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one in which he would be able to put his tumultuous relationship with Brooke behind him. However, things became more problematic when Jack Wagner's character Nick Marone returned. Nick, a rough-and-tumble sailor who had a romantic past with both Brooke and Taylor, showed up in Los Angeles as the Forrester Creations crew was getting ready for their trip to Italy. His appearance rekindled long-standing emotions, especially for Brooke, who had been devastated by Ridge's choice of Taylor. With a fashion presentation showcasing creations by regional designer Luisa Beccaria, the Italy shoot was intended to celebrate Forrester Creations' global presence. Rather, it served as the backdrop for a pivotal encounter that would alter everything. Brooke was attracted to Nick in Naples, amid the colorful commotion of the fashion show preparations. Unquestionably, their chemistry was revived by Italy's romantic charm. Ever the envious suitor, Ridge noticed the change. In a TV Insider interview, Kaye alluded to Ridge's insecurity by stating that his character was intimidated by any man who could provide Brooke with the full attention she was entitled to. Kaye had stated, "Any man who walks in and is ready to give Brooke the full attention she deserves threatens Ridge, not necessarily Nick as a person." In the episodes, Ridge's sensitivity was evident as he saw Brooke and Nick becoming closer, their exchanges brimming with the kind of natural connection that had always eluded him in his relationships. Every look and touch felt like a betrayal because of the Mediterranean's golden cliffs and azure seas, which only raised the emotional stakes. The pivotal moment occurred during a contentious discussion on La Canzone del Mare's terrace. Brooke addressed Ridge because he was tired of his hesitation and lack of commitment. She accused him of manipulating her feelings, and of using Taylor as a buffer whenever their relationship faltered. Brooke's suffering was exposed during the heated conversation, as she said she was entitled to better treatment. Supporters encouraged her since they had seen Brooke support Ridge through innumerable betrayals. In an interview with Soap Opera Digest, Kaye had praised the moment and acknowledged that Ridge had it coming, for his inability to decide between the 2 women in his life. Ridge was left to deal with the consequences of her statements alone after Brooke stormed off at the end of the confrontation. It felt like a fatal moment, a break that might never mend. The true shock, however, came later in a surprising turn. Ridge suggested to Taylor that they strengthen their bond and even get married in Italy during a private moment. But Taylor was hesitant. The character, a woman who had suffered years of grief at Ridge's hands, was given a quiet strength by Rebecca Budig's portrayal. In a moving moment, Taylor told him she couldn't trust his heart to stay with her, and turned down his proposal. Both Ridge and the fans who had hoped for a Tridge reunion were devastated by the denial. Taylor's justification stemmed from her past relationship with Ridge, where she had been the other woman far too frequently and always ranked second in his eyes to Brooke. Originally intended as a romantic backdrop, Italy ended up serving as the backdrop for Ridge's collapse. There were rumors that Thorsten Kaye's departure from the program was caused by this refusal. Fans expressed their surprise and dismay on social media, especially X. After more than 10 years of traveling from New York to Los Angeles to shoot The Bold and the Beautiful, posts conjectured that Kaye was fed up with the demanding schedule. The frequent travel had taken its toll on his family, which still included his wife Susan Haskell and his 2 kids, McKenna and Marlo, who lived on the East Coast. Kaye had made reference to his wish to take a vacation in a 2021 interview with the Belgian publication HLN, stating that he would need to be written out of the show for several months due to a planned family vacation. He had hinted that his departure would be permanent when he said, "I have already agreed with my boss that next year or the year after, he should write me out of the story for a few months." These concerns appeared to be validated by the Italy plot. Ridge was written into a soul-searching arc following Taylor's rejection, which had him leaving Los Angeles for an indeterminate amount of time. Although Kaye's remarks in recent interviews implied otherwise, the show's creators left the possibility of his comeback open. He talked openly about his life with Haskell and their daughters in an interview with Woman's World, highlighting his wish to put his family first. Regarding Haskell, he suggested that he could be prepared to take a break from the rigorous world of daytime television by saying, "She gave me 2 beautiful kids and many years of her life that should have been spent being an actor." For Ridge, and possibly Kaye as well, the rejection in Italy and the mental strain of Brooke's encounter appeared to be the last straw. Fans' reactions ranged from fury to grief. Many saw Ridge as the essence of The Bold and the Beautiful, a character whose emotions and imperfections had shaped the show's plot for almost 40 years. It was impossible to imagine a Bold and Beautiful without Ridge, but it hurt even more that there would be no Bridge reunion. Fans had hoped that Brooke and Ridge would reunite after their love story had survived every adversity, including business takeovers and extramarital affairs. But the episodes from Italy pointed to a different direction. Brooke's developing relationship with Nick suggested that she would eventually move on from Ridge in a new chapter. Ridge, however, was left adrift and without a clear way ahead after Taylor rejected him. Fans were given optimism when Bradley Bell, the show's executive producer, previously stated in an interview with an Italian magazine that Ridge and Brooke would eventually get back together. However, the most recent events ran counter to that pledge, raising the possibility that Bell had altered his plans. According to some fans, Kaye's exit was a calculated movement to change the dynamics of the program and add new plotlines. Others said it was personal, motivated by Kaye's wish to leave the position that had characterized him for more than 10 years. For whatever reason, the news of his departure clouded the Italy episodes, which were supposed to celebrate the show's popularity around the world. The Bold and Beautiful community was left to wonder what lay ahead as the dust settled. Would Ridge make a comeback, maybe in a different role? Would Nick and Brooke end up being the next power couple on the show? What about Taylor, whose denial of Ridge had initiated this series of events? Although the explanations were still a mystery, one thing was certain: the concert would be without Thorsten Kaye. Fans were captivated by his relationship with both Catherine Kelly Lang and Rebecca Budig, and his portrayal of Ridge had given humanity and depth to a character that could have easily been a caricature. With their stunning landscapes and intense emotional content, the Italy episodes would go down in history as a watershed, a time when the world of Bold and Beautiful underwent an irreversible change. Fans could only watch in the hopes that Ridge would return to Los Angeles in a miracle. However, the echoes of Taylor's rejection and Brooke's remarks persisted, serving as a reminder that some bridges cannot be repaired, even in the soap opera world where love triumphs over all obstacles. Ridge's heart had a mission as he stepped onto the Forrester Creations plane headed for Italy. After months of introspection, he had come to feel that Brooke was the one that fate had always brought him to. A part of him had always thought they were unavoidable, in spite of all the chaos, the deceptions, and the betrayals. They were given the moniker Bridge by their family, supporters, and even fate. They were the ideal couple, the tale of love that was meant to last through years of heartache. He believed she was also aware of that. However, something had changed in Italy. The woman who had previously waited impatiently for his love was no longer Brooke. In her eyes he saw resolve instead of resentment or hatred. She had mastered independence. She had discovered that true love isn't characterized by recurring cycles of rejection and reconnection. With an assurance that seemed to transcend time, Ridge stood under the warm Italian sun and gazed across the Roman skyline, the same one where he had once planted a kiss on Brooke. To get her back he had come here. Rather, he stood there in the shadow of rejection. There were rumors circulating like wildfire back in Los Angeles. Fans worldwide couldn't conceal their shock as rumors circulated on the set of The Bold and the Beautiful. Bridge would not be reunited. What many had started to think was verified by Thorsten Kaye, the man who had given Ridge Forrester a more brooding complexity and a deeper edge. He was heading out. Many people adored the actor, while others ridiculed him, and he had finally had enough. Thorsten was leaving after playing Ridge with a subtle intensity for almost 10 years. He didn't make a snap decision. It followed years of personal conflict, creative setbacks, and an increasing realization that Ridge's story had come to a logical end. In a low-key interview that aired late on a Thursday evening, Thorsten declared, "It's time." He appeared worn out but determined, a man content with his choice. Emotions can only be rehashed so often before they lose their significance. Ridge left Brooke because he loved her. He has come back, betrayed, pleaded, and wept. Eventually, you have to ask yourself if we're merely keeping it alive or if we're telling a tale. Many veteran watchers who have followed the Bridge story for decades were hurt by his remarks. Others, however, comprehended. In recent months, Thorsten's image had changed. There was a hint of fatigue in Ridge's eyes and a slight resentment in his voice whenever he discussed fate or love. It was a last attempt at atonement that the authors dispatched Ridge to Rome. But what had been forgiven 100 times over? And from what could he be redeemed? Behind the scenes, Catherine Kelly Lang, better known as Brooke, had her own thoughts on the storyline. After the Italian trip plot, she had been quiet for weeks. Fans conjectured about everything from conflicts with script direction to difficulties off-screen. But it was easier to see the truth as it came out in silence. Brooke's growth had been battled for by Catherine. Ridge, Bill, Nick, and occasionally even Eric were all characters in Brooke's love stories, which had always defined her. She had been stuck in a never-ending cycle for years, thrown around like a leaf in the storm of masculine desire. She had recently discovered her own voice, though. The authors had begun writing a new Brooke, a lady who no longer waited by the phone or pleaded for affection. Catherine agreed with it as well. Brooke could see that Ridge anticipated the same pattern in his eyes when he arrived in Rome. They would return to each other's embrace after exchanging a kiss and a vow. However, she was no longer able to do it. She finally liked herself more, not because she didn't love him, she always would somehow. Thorsten was also aware of it. There was more than simply acting in that scene in the courtyard with the city glimmering behind them. There was a conclusion. He felt the truth when he looked at Catherine, not Ridge's reality but his own. They had finished their story. CBS producers were enmeshed in a tornado of response. Executives made an effort to compromise and rewrite the plot to find a common ground. Thorsten, however, was unambiguous. He had no desire to take Ridge through yet another cycle of heartache and longing. He had devoted himself fully to the part. Ridge had been to him a place of wounds and frailty, of silent rages and internal strife. The focus shifted from who Ridge loved to who Ridge was. Ridge appeared to be engrossed in the love that was meant to characterize him. The cast was affected by his departure. John McCook was among those who voiced their profound admiration for Thorsten's choice to leave while the character was still respectable. Others were quite aback by how definitive everything appeared. No door is open. No sign of a comeback. Just an actor making the decision to leave politely. The response was intense in the online fandom. Devastated were longtime Bridge shippers. What if this is the end? How could the couple that made it through tragedy time and Taylor Hayes not make it through Rome? Others applauded the action. They claimed it was courageous and bold. It allowed the narrative to unfold. Brooke gained power from it. And maybe that was the idea after all. In Italy, Brooke stood by himself with strength rather than grief. She didn't call Ridge back, instead watching him leave. She refrained from crying. She didn't pursue. With her head held high, she returned to Los Angeles as a reborn woman rather than one who had been despised. And after so many years of grieving in circles, perhaps just possibly, it was the only conclusion that could ever make sense. On a warm Friday night, Thorsten's last scenes were broadcast. With his bag in hand, Ridge stood in front of the Forrester estate and gazed out into the twilight of Los Angeles. There was no yelling match, no dramatic parting, and no last-minute entreaty. Just a silent exit. A man who had at last come to terms with the fact that love isn't always enough. That sometimes the only way to respect the past is to let go. He wrote a little message in his characteristic handwriting and put it on Brooke's doorstep. I returned to get you. However, I realize now that I returned too late. I'm no longer necessary for you, and letting you go might be the best thing I've ever done for you. R. Brooke silently read the note. She shed a single tear, yet she remained composed. After folding the letter and briefly holding it to her heart, she turned to leave. Work needed to be done, a family needed to be raised, and Ridge Forrester was no longer the center of the future. Not with a bang, but with a sigh, the bold and the beautiful had ended a chapter. A gentle release of a decades-long love tale. It was never flawless. It was frequently dirty, painful, passionate, and maddening. It had mattered, though. There was no spectacular montage as Thorsten's last episode's credits rolled. Just one picture. Brooke and Ridge smiling on a Roman bridge years ago, before everything fell apart. Slowly, like a memory fading from the heart, it turned black. After that bridge was gone, the performance would continue. The corridors of Forrester Creations would be alive with new secrets, betrayals, and loves. However, something had changed for those who had been there from the start. At last, Ridge and Brooke's narrative was concluded, not tragically but peacefully. Perhaps that was the most daring and exquisite conclusion of them.